You were never leadership material. That's what my manager told me after secretly blocking my promotion for nearly a year while using my work to impress executives. I stayed quiet that night. I even shook his hand. But when his biggest career moment finally arrived, I made sure the entire industry saw who he really was. You were never leadership material. 3 years earlier, I walked into Veltrix Dynamics carrying a laptop bag that still had a college sticker peeling off the side. I was 28, broke, ambitious, and stupid enough to believe hard work always got noticed. Veltrix was one of those fast-growing logistics tech companies that loved throwing around words like culture, family, and future leadership. Exposed brick walls, espresso machines nobody cleaned, executives wearing sneakers with $1,000 watches, and somewhere inside all that fake modern energy was Graham Holloway, Regional Operations Director, my manager. The first time we met, he shook my hand with both of his. "Ethan Mercer," he said, smiling like a politician. "I've heard really good things." Back then, that sentence meant everything to me. Within 6 months, I became the guy everybody dumped problems on. Client threatening to leave? Call Ethan. Warehouse software crash at 1 a.m.? Call Ethan. New hires falling behind? Let Ethan train them. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that this was what earning your spot looked like. And honestly, I was good at it. Too good. One winter, a shipping failure nearly cost the company a $7 million retail contract. Graham pulled me into a conference room at almost midnight while executives panicked on Zoom. "You fix this," he whispered, loosening his tie, "and I'll personally make sure you're promoted this year." I stayed awake for 36 hours rebuilding the distribution schedules manually. The client stayed. The executives celebrated Graham, and a week later during the department meeting, Graham pointed toward me and laughed. "Couldn't have done it without my team." My team, not me. At the time, I ignored how much that bothered me. That became the pattern. Every major success somehow circled back to Graham. He had this polished executive charm that made people trust him instantly. He remembered birthdays, sent motivational emails at 5 a.m., took junior staff out for drinks, but behind closed doors, he operated differently. If an executive complimented my work during meetings, Graham would smoothly jump in before I could answer. "Ethan's been improving a lot lately," he'd say. "Still needs guidance, but he's getting there." Guidance, like I was some intern he molded personally. I remember one afternoon after finishing a brutal quarterly operations report. 80 pages. I built the entire thing myself over 2 straight weekends. The next morning, Graham presented it to senior leadership without my name anywhere on it. I sat in the back of the conference room listening to executives praise his strategy. Then he walked past me afterward, handed me a coffee, and said, "Good work, buddy. This is how visibility happens." I actually thanked him. That's the embarrassing part. I really believed he was helping me. Around year 2, people inside the office started assuming I'd become regional operations lead eventually. Even other departments treated it like an unofficial fact, including me, especially me, because Graham kept feeding it. "You're next up. Just stay patient. Execs already see you as leadership." Those little promises became dangerous. They kept me loyal every time I wanted to quit. Meanwhile, my real life slowly disappeared. Missed birthdays, canceled vacations, ignored texts from my younger brother for weeks. I dated a woman named Claire for almost a year before she finally looked at me across dinner one night and said, "You talk about your manager more than you talk about yourself." 2 months later, she left. I still went into work the next morning. That's how deep I was in it. Then there was Mila Bennett from HR. Mila noticed things other people didn't. Quiet people always do. One evening she stopped by my desk while I was fixing inventory reports long after everyone else had gone home. She leaned against the cubicle wall holding her coat. "You trust Graham way too much," she said casually. I barely looked up. "He's tough, but he's helped me a lot." Mila gave me this strange look. Not judgmental, more like disappointment. Then she said something I didn't fully understand until much later. "Some managers don't promote the people who make them look successful." And before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. At the time, I thought she was being cynical. I had no idea she was warning me. The first sign something was wrong came 3 weeks before promotion reviews. Not from Graham, from my calendar. I walked into the office Monday morning, balancing cold coffee and my laptop, when I noticed an executive strategy meeting had disappeared from my schedule. That wasn't normal. I'd been attending those meetings for over a year. At first I assumed it was an accident. Then it happened again, and again. Each time I asked Graham about it, he answered too quickly. Smaller group this quarter. Nothing important. Trying to reduce meeting clutter. But he wouldn't look directly at me when he said it. That's what started bothering me. Not the words, the eye contact. Around the same time, a new operations coordinator named Connor Vale started hovering around my desk constantly. Connor was young, polished, confident in an exhausting way. The kind of guy who used phrases like circle back and bandwidth every 5 minutes. At first I liked him. Then I realized he wasn't shadowing me casually. Graham had assigned him to learn my entire workflow. Every spreadsheet, every client escalation process, every reporting system I built. One afternoon, Connor rolled his chair beside mine holding a notebook. Graham says you've basically built the backbone of regional ops, he said. I laughed tiredly. Feels more like duct tape and caffeine. Connor smirked. Then he asked something strange. So if you move up, who replaces you? The question sat in my stomach the rest of the day. That night I stayed late, finishing quarterly projections while most of the office emptied out. Around 9 p.m., I passed Graham's office and heard voices inside. Connor was in there. The blinds were partially closed. I couldn't hear much, just Graham saying, "He doesn't suspect anything." I stopped walking, for maybe 2 seconds. Then I convinced myself I was being paranoid and kept moving. That's the dangerous thing about loyalty. Your brain protects the people hurting you. A week later, I finally confronted Graham directly. Not aggressively, just enough to calm the anxiety building in my chest. We were standing near the break room while rain hammered against the office windows. "Hey," I said carefully, "should I be worried about the promotion timeline?" Graham instantly smiled. Too instantly. "Ethan, come on," he laughed, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You think I'd screw you over after everything you've done here?" The wording hit me weird. Not, "You're getting promoted." Not, "Everything's fine." Just, "You think I'd screw you over?" Then he lowered his voice. "Executives already love you. Relax." And somehow, I did. For about 4 more days, until the gala. Every December, Veltrix hosted this massive corporate event downtown at the Halcyon Grand Hotel. Open bar, live music, executive speeches, fake laughter everywhere. Employees treated it like the Super Bowl of office politics. I wore a charcoal suit that still had wrinkles because I'd barely slept all week. The ballroom was packed with regional directors, investors, department heads, and clients. Giant crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. Jazz music echoing through the room. And Graham looked happier than I'd ever seen him. That should have warned me. Halfway through dinner, the CEO stepped onto the stage, holding an envelope. The room quieted instantly. "Tonight," he announced, "we're excited to recognize a new regional operations lead." My pulse exploded. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers hurt. Connor sat 2 tables away, pretending not to look nervous. Then the CEO smiled. Connor Vale. For 1 second, my brain genuinely stopped processing sound. People started clapping. Connor stood up slowly, in fake shock, while Graham grinned beside him like a proud father. And then it got worse. Much worse. The CEO began listing Connor's accomplishments. Systems improvements, client retention recovery, operational restructuring, my work, every single one. I sat there frozen while executives applauded achievements I'd spent 3 years bleeding over. Connor even glanced toward me once. Briefly, like he knew. Like he was uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to refuse the promotion. Then Graham raised a champagne glass toward me from across the ballroom. Actually raised it, like we were celebrating together. Something inside my chest physically dropped, not emotionally, physically. My hearing narrowed until the ballroom sounded underwater. My hands started sweating so badly I could barely hold my drink. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking out. I only remember ending up alone near the hotel elevators, staring at my reflection in mirrored walls while people laughed somewhere behind me. 3 years. 3 years of 80-hour weeks. 3 years of promises. 3 years of making another man look brilliant. Gone in under 60 seconds. Then came the part that truly broke me. About an hour later, I walked outside behind the hotel, trying to breathe through the anger shaking in my body. Snow drifted through the parking lot lights. That's when I heard Graham's voice near the valet station. He was drunk, laughing with another director. I should have walked away. Instead, I stopped behind a concrete pillar when I heard my name. "Mercer's too useful where he is," Graham said casually. "You don't promote people like that. Then you gotta replace them." The other guy laughed, and Graham added, "Besides, Connor's easier to control." I felt something cold move through me. Not sadness anymore. Not shock. Just clarity. For the first time in 3 years, I understood exactly who Graham Holloway really was. I called in sick the next morning. Not because I wanted sympathy, because I genuinely couldn't make my body move. I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling of my apartment, while sunlight crawled slowly across the walls. My phone kept vibrating with work notifications, Slack messages, congratulatory emails about Connor's promotion. I ignored all of them. Around noon, Graham texted me, "Let's talk Monday, don't overreact." That message sat on my screen for nearly an hour. Don't overreact. Like I'd spilled coffee instead of losing 3 years of my life. By the third day, sleep stopped feeling normal. I'd drift off for maybe 40 minutes before waking up angry again. My jaw constantly hurt from clenching it. I replayed every interaction with Graham obsessively. Every compliment. Every promise. Every fake mentorship conversation. The worst part wasn't losing the promotion. It was realizing how stupid I looked in hindsight. I had defended that man, to coworkers, to friends, even to Claire before she left. I kept hearing Mila's voice in my head. Some managers don't promote the people who make them look successful. Now it sounded less like advice and more like a warning from someone who already knew the ending. The following Monday, I finally went back into the office. Everything felt different immediately. People avoided eye contact. Coworkers who used to stop by my desk suddenly became busy whenever I walked past. Nobody wanted to get near workplace humiliation. Corporate people treat disappointment like it's contagious. Connor had already moved into the corner office beside Graham's. My office, or at least the one I thought was supposed to become mine. When I sat down at my desk, I noticed half my project access had been reassigned overnight. No conversation, no explanation, just gone. Then Graham appeared beside my cubicle, holding 2 coffees like we were still friends. "Can we chat?" he asked softly. I followed him into a private conference room. Glass walls, city skyline behind him. The kind of room where careers quietly die. Graham closed the door and sighed dramatically. "Look," he began. "Executive leadership had concerns." I said nothing. "They don't think you're ready for high-level management yet." My stomach twisted. "Based on what?" Graham leaned back in his chair carefully. "Leadership presence. Emotional composure, strategic communication." It almost impressed me how professionally he lied. I stared at him for a few seconds before asking the only thing I still cared about. "Did you recommend Connor over me?" Tiny pause. That was all I needed. Then he said, "I recommended what was best for the company." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because anger had reached a level where it stopped feeling real. Graham's expression hardened slightly. "You're valuable, Ethan. But some people are builders. Some people are leaders." That sentence followed me for weeks. Builders, meaning people like me do the work while people like him take the credit. After that conversation, something inside me started collapsing quietly. I stopped staying late, stopped volunteering ideas, stopped caring when systems failed. And weirdly, nobody noticed at first. That's how invisible I'd become. At home, things got uglier. Takeout containers stacked beside the sink, laundry everywhere. I'd sit awake at 2 a.m. opening old performance reviews, trying to understand where things changed. Sometimes I'd type resignation emails and delete them 10 minutes later. Other nights I'd imagine walking into Graham's office and smashing his teeth against the conference table. That scared me. Not the thought itself. How good it felt. Then one evening Mila appeared beside my desk again, after most employees had left. She looked nervous. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said quietly. I turned toward her slowly. Mila glanced around before lowering her voice. "Graham blocked your promotion twice." The room went silent. "What?" "He told executives you lacked leadership maturity," she continued. "Said you worked hard but couldn't handle pressure." I felt heat rush into my face. Mila swallowed hard before adding the part that truly shattered me. "And honestly, keeping you in your current role made his department numbers look incredible." There it was, the truth. I wasn't overlooked. I was intentionally trapped. A high-performing employee chained to a position because my success inflated Graham's reputation. For several seconds, I couldn't even speak. Then Mila handed me a printed conference flyer. National Leadership Innovation Summit, Chicago. 3 weeks away. At the center of the flyer was Graham's smiling headshot. Below it, recipient of the Emerging Executive Excellence Award. Mila looked directly at me. "He's been bragging about this for months." I stared at Graham's face printed on glossy paper, while something cold settled into my chest. Not rage anymore. Something quieter, more dangerous. Because for the first time since the gala, I stopped thinking about quitting and started thinking about consequences. For the next 2 weeks, I became the version of myself Graham always wanted. Quiet, predictable, useful. I showed up on time, answered emails, sat through meetings pretending nothing had changed while Connor stumbled through responsibilities he barely understood. And the entire time, I watched. That's the funny thing about toxic managers. Once they think they've broken you, they stop being careful. Graham especially. He walked around the office lighter now, relaxed, smug, like he'd finally removed the only person capable of threatening his position. One afternoon, I overheard him joking near the sales department. "Promotion season gets emotional," he laughed. "Some people just aren't built for leadership pressure." People chuckled politely. I kept walking, but inside, something hardened. Every night after work, I started digging through old files at home. Not for revenge at first. At least that's what I told myself. I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that 3 years of my life hadn't been stolen so cleanly that nobody would ever know. Turns out, corporate people leave fingerprints everywhere, especially arrogant ones. I found archived reports with my original metadata still attached before presentation titles were changed under Connor's name. Slack exports showing Graham privately instructing managers to redirect executive praise away from me. Performance reviews, edited after submission dates, client recovery documents I created entirely alone that later appeared in Graham's leadership portfolio. The deeper I looked, the uglier it got. This wasn't favoritism. It was systematic manipulation. And Graham had been doing it for years. Not just to me. I discovered old resignation emails from former employees buried inside HR complaint attachments. Different departments, same pattern. Overworked high performers, promised advancement, quietly blocked, replaced with more politically useful people. One name kept appearing repeatedly inside internal conversations. "Protect Graham's numbers." That line made me physically sick. Meanwhile, Connor's promotion started falling apart publicly. He couldn't handle the workload because the systems he inherited were never actually his. Clients escalated issues daily, meetings became tense, executives started asking questions, and every single time something failed, Graham pushed Connor harder, never himself. I watched Connor slowly realize he'd been used too. One evening he stopped beside my desk after hours looking exhausted. "I think Graham hates asking for help," he muttered awkwardly. I looked at him for a long second, then said, "No, he hates losing control." Connor didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. A few days later, Mila called me from a private number. "You need to see this," she whispered. We met in the parking garage beneath the office around 8 p.m. Concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights. The entire situation felt insane. Mila handed me a small flash drive. "What's this?" "Internal audit copies." I stared at her. "You stole audit files?" "I borrowed them," she corrected nervously. Inside those files was the moment everything changed. Budget manipulation, inflated departmental performance metrics, altered staffing forecasts. Graham had been reshaping operational numbers before executive reviews to make himself look indispensable. And the promotion decisions? Those numbers directly influenced them, meaning Connor's promotion wasn't just unfair. It was built on falsified performance narratives. I leaned against my car, trying to process what I was seeing. Mila crossed her arms tightly. "If this goes public," she said carefully, "it'll become bigger than one promotion." She was right. At that moment, I had options. Report him internally, threaten legal action, quit dramatically. But none of those felt right anymore. Because Graham didn't just betray me privately. He humiliated me publicly. He turned my loyalty into a tool. And now, he was about to stand on stage, in front of an entire industry, accepting an award for leadership. That part mattered to him more than money, more than the company, more than anything. I realized then that revenge only works when it attacks the exact thing someone values most. For Graham, that was his image, his reputation, the polished executive persona he spent years building. So I waited, quietly, carefully. I organized every file, email, timestamp, and audit discrepancy into a single encrypted folder. I cross-referenced project ownership records, built timelines, archived deleted communications. The process became obsessive, but strangely calming too. For the first time in months, I felt focused again. Not emotional, focused. 3 days before the leadership summit in Chicago, I finally made my move. Not publicly, strategically. I anonymously submitted the evidence package to conference compliance officers, Veltrix board members, external audit counsel, 2 executive sponsors attending the event. No threats, no emotional rant, just documents, cold facts. And at the very end, one sentence. "Before honoring Graham Holloway for leadership excellence, you may want to review how his success was actually achieved." Then I shut my laptop and sat in silence. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Because deep down, I knew there was no coming back from what I'd just started. The Leadership Innovation Summit was held at the Blackstone Regency in downtown Chicago. Massive ballroom, glass chandeliers, media crews near the entrance. Executives everywhere pretending they changed the world by answering emails faster than everyone else. I arrived early and stayed near the back of the ballroom, where nobody from Veltrix would immediately notice me. Gray suit, no company badge, just another attendee blending into the crowd. But internally, I felt like a live grenade. On stage, giant LED screens rotated through sponsor logos and executive highlights. Every few minutes, Graham's face appeared smiling beside the words, "Emerging Executive Excellence Award recipient." Even from across the room, seeing it made my jaw tighten, because I knew exactly how much he loved this kind of attention. Recognition was oxygen to him. By noon, the ballroom was packed. Regional directors, investors, corporate media bloggers, industry consultants, and Veltrix executives sitting proudly near the front tables. Then Graham walked in, navy suit, silver tie, perfect posture. The man genuinely looked unstoppable. People shook his hand non-stop while he performed that same polished humility I'd watched for 3 years. "Honored to be here. Couldn't have done it without my team. My people deserve the credit." Hearing those lines again almost made me laugh out loud. Connor arrived a few minutes later, looking exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Nervous energy. He kept checking his phone like he already sensed something was wrong. Then Graham spotted me. For half a second, surprise flashed across his face, but only half a second. After that, he smiled confidently and walked over. "Ethan," he said warmly, extending his hand. Didn't expect to see you here. I shook it, firmly. Wouldn't miss it. His eyes studied mine carefully, probably searching for bitterness, anger, desperation. Instead, I gave him nothing. That unsettled him more. You doing all right? He asked quietly. I nodded once. Better than before. For the first time all day, Graham looked slightly uncomfortable. Then someone called his name from across the ballroom, and just like that, he snapped back into executive mode and walked away smiling again. An hour later, the ceremony began. Applause echoed through the ballroom as executives took turns giving speeches about innovation, leadership, integrity, and company culture. The usual corporate fantasy language. Finally, Graham's category was announced. The host grinned toward the audience. This year's Emerging Executive Excellence Award goes to a leader recognized for mentorship, operational transformation, and exceptional team development. I felt my pulse climbing. Around me, people started clapping before his name was even announced. Then, Graham Holloway. Huge applause. Graham stood slowly, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked toward the stage while cameras followed him across giant projection screens. And honestly, for one terrifying second, I thought maybe nothing was going to happen. Maybe the emails were ignored. Maybe the evidence wasn't enough. Maybe I'd destroyed my own future for absolutely nothing. Graham stepped behind the podium, smiling confidently while applause faded. He started giving his speech calmly, talking about leadership, trust, developing talent. At one point he actually said, "Great managers elevate the people around them." That line nearly made me sick. Then it happened. Near the left side of the ballroom, two conference compliance officers suddenly approached the stage. At first people looked confused, then four more individuals appeared behind them. One of them was a Veltrix board member. Another was external legal counsel. The atmosphere shifted instantly. You could physically feel it. Graham stopped talking mid-sentence. One compliance officer leaned toward him and quietly said something near his ear. I watched the color drain from Graham's face in real time. The ballroom went dead silent. No music, no movement. Just hundreds of people staring. Graham forced a nervous smile toward the audience. Then the board member stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to pause the ceremony temporarily due to an active compliance matter under review. The room exploded into whispers immediately. Phones came out everywhere. People started standing. Connor looked horrified. And then came the twist even I didn't expect. Because apparently, after receiving my evidence package, external auditors had already started investigating Veltrix quietly days earlier, and they found far more than promotion sabotage. Much more. Manipulated operational metrics, internal financial misreporting, fraudulent productivity benchmarks tied to executive bonuses. The deeper investigators looked, the uglier Graham's entire department became. From across the ballroom, I watched Graham arguing desperately with legal counsel backstage, while camera flashes exploded around them. For the first time in 3 years, he looked powerless, and somehow that felt even heavier than satisfying. The ballroom had completely fallen apart within minutes. Executives huddled together whispering aggressively. Conference staff rushed between tables trying to stop attendees from recording videos. Too late. Half the room already had phones out. Industry bloggers were typing live updates before Graham had even left the stage. And through all that chaos, I just stood there, completely still. Because after months of anger, obsession, and humiliation, reality suddenly felt strangely quiet. Then I saw Graham looking directly at me from across the ballroom. Not confused anymore. Not suspicious. He knew. The moment our eyes locked, he understood exactly who detonated his perfect little executive fantasy. And honestly, that hurt him more than the investigation itself. Because deep down, Graham never believed I'd fight back. A few minutes later, I stepped into a service hallway behind the ballroom trying to breathe. Hotel staff rushed past carrying equipment while muffled noise echoed from the ceremony outside. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, aggressive. I turned. Graham. His face looked completely different now. The polished executive smile was gone. His tie hung loose around his collar, and panic bled through every movement. "You did this," he snapped. "Not even a question." I said nothing. Graham stepped closer. "Are you out of your mind?" he hissed. "Do you understand what you've caused?" I laughed quietly. That seemed to make him angrier. "You think this makes you a hero?" he continued. "You just destroyed an entire division." "No," I said calmly. "You did." His jaw tightened hard. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Instead, he pointed a shaking finger toward my chest. "I gave you opportunities." That sentence genuinely stunned me. Even now, even after everything collapsed, he still saw himself as the victim. I stared at him in disbelief. "You stole my work," I said quietly. "You blocked my promotion. You lied to executives for years." Graham scoffed bitterly. "That's how this industry works." There it was, the truth underneath all the leadership speeches and mentorship garbage. To him, exploitation wasn't immoral. It was normal, necessary, expected. And suddenly I realized something important. Graham probably started his career exactly like me. Overworked, ambitious, desperate to prove himself. Except somewhere along the way, he became the kind of person who survives by standing on other people's backs. The difference between us wasn't pressure. It was choice. Outside the hallway, noise kept building as more executives learned what was happening. I could hear fragments of conversations echoing through the corridor. Legal exposure, board investigation, media already posting. Graham heard it too, and panic finally replaced arrogance. His voice lowered suddenly. "Ethan, listen to me carefully." That tone, calm, manipulative, strategic, the same voice he used during every fake mentorship conversation. "We can still fix this." I almost smiled, because even then, he still thought everything was negotiable. "What exactly are you offering me?" I asked. He swallowed. "Your promotion." I actually laughed this time. A real laugh. Not angry, not emotional, just disbelief. 3 years of loyalty, months of humiliation. And now, when his own career was collapsing, suddenly I was leadership material again. That moment healed something inside me more than revenge ever could, because I finally understood my value had never changed. Only his need for me had. I stepped closer until we stood only a few feet apart. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked quietly. Graham stared at me silently. "I would have kept protecting you." That hit him harder than yelling ever could. I saw it in his face instantly, because it was true. If he had simply promoted me fairly, I probably would have stayed loyal for years, covered his mistakes, defended him, helped him climb higher. Instead, his greed made him destroy the one person keeping his entire system stable. A few seconds later, 2 hotel security officers appeared at the hallway entrance beside Veltrick's legal counsel. One of the attorneys spoke carefully. "Mr. Holloway, we need you to come with us." Graham looked at me one final time, and for the first time since I met him, he looked small. Not powerful, not intelligent, just terrified. As security escorted him down the hallway, people near the ballroom entrance turned to stare. Some whispered. Others openly recorded videos. The award ceremony never resumed. By morning, clips of the incident were already spreading across corporate media pages, with headlines about executive misconduct investigations at Veltrick's Dynamics. And somewhere inside all that public chaos, a strange realization finally settled over me. I hadn't ruined Graham's life. I had simply stopped carrying it for him. The investigation lasted 4 months. Long enough for the entire company to start pretending Graham Holloway had never existed. His photos quietly disappeared from internal newsletters. Leadership pages on the company website got updated overnight. Executives who used to praise him suddenly described him as deeply disappointing. Corporate loyalty is funny like that. People worship success right up until it becomes expensive. Veltrix never publicly released the full investigation results, but enough leaked internally for everyone to understand how bad things really were. Multiple department metrics had been manipulated. Promotion evaluations were compromised. Employee performance data had been strategically altered to inflate leadership results. And Graham hadn't acted alone. A few senior managers resigned before formal reviews even finished. Connor lasted maybe 6 weeks after the conference. I saw him once near the parking garage carrying a cardboard box filled with desk junk. He looked exhausted, embarrassed, smaller somehow. When he noticed me, he stopped awkwardly. I didn't know how deep it went, he admitted quietly. Part of me wanted to hate him forever. But honestly, Connor wasn't the architect. He was just another ambitious employee who convinced himself benefiting from corruption wasn't the same as participating in it. That's how toxic systems survive. Normal people compromise slowly. I nodded once. Yeah, I said, I know. And that was it. No dramatic closure, no screaming, just two people standing in silence beside concrete pillars, realizing careers can collapse faster than they're built. A month later, Veltrix executives contacted me privately. They offered compensation, leadership reinstatement, retention bonuses, basically corporate panic money. I declined all of it, because by then I understood something I wish I'd realized years earlier. A company willing to exploit your loyalty once will usually do it again the moment it becomes profitable. So I left. No farewell speech, no dramatic exit. I packed my desk on a quiet Thursday morning, while most people pretended not to watch. Mila hugged me near the elevators before I left. "You okay?" she asked softly. I thought about it honestly before answering. Not really, I admitted. Because revenge is strange. People imagine it feels triumphant, clean. But the truth is, betrayal changes you permanently, even when you win. Especially when you win. A few months later, I took a position at a smaller logistics firm outside Denver. Smaller team, lower title, less money. But the first time my new director publicly credited me during a meeting, I almost didn't know how to react. That's how damaged I'd become. Even now, years later, certain things still trigger memories. Corporate award speeches, fake mentorship language, managers calling employees family. Maybe that never fully leaves you. But one thing did change after Chicago. I stopped confusing loyalty with self-destruction. And honestly, that lesson cost me 3 years of my life to learn. A lot of people who heard about what happened at that conference think this story is about revenge. It's not. Not really. It's about what happens when someone spends years turning your loyalty into a weapon against you. Managers like Graham don't just damage careers. They damage confidence, identity, trust. They make hardworking people question their own value while quietly profiting from their effort behind closed doors. And the worst part? Most companies don't notice it until everything explodes publicly. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Graham had simply promoted me fairly. Honestly, I probably would have stayed loyal to him for years. That's the irony that still haunts me. Not the revenge. The fact that none of it had to happen. But according to people who still work at Veltrix, employees there still talk about the Chicago conference like it's corporate folklore. The night an executive walked